Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast. My name's Jane Baylor. As ever, I have a very fun and interesting guest for you tonight, and it's Joe Frankie the Third. So, welcome, Joe. How are you?
Oh, I am fine. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So, Joe, you're in Little Italy, aren't you, at the moment in New York?
No, I'm in
Oh,
Maggiano's Little Italy in Houston, Texas.
oh, oh, okay. Do you know, that goes to show, doesn't it? I had absolutely no idea that there was more than one Little Italy in the US, and now I've learnt something.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so how do the 2 Little Italies differ?
Oh, well, Maggiano's you can go to different locations and different locale. There's probably three or four in the Houston area, and
Oh,
this one is in the Memorial City area.
okay. Yeah. Okay, well, that's all fun. Well, that's me, isn't it? Put in my place and got things completely wrong to start off with, but, hey, it doesn't really matter, does it? We're just here to have a
We
fascinating
absolutely.
and interesting conversation, right? So let me introduce you. So you help leaders across multiple sectors reach their goals. You've got 40 years experience of leading multifunctional teams as well in both private and public sectors. And what you do is you help people figure out what's next and how to sell themselves to get what they want. I mean, that's great, isn't it? Because we all need to figure out what's next and sell ourselves to get what we want. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation. And you're also a LinkedIn specialist, and you've been doing LinkedIn for 18 years and training on it for the last 17. And so you've written a book called LinkedIn, the 5 Minute Drill for LinkedIn Networking Success. So we're going to spend some time tonight talking about LinkedIn specifically, because I'm sure that it's changed a lot over the last 17 or 18 years. So, it'd be really interesting to have your perspective really on what's changed, what's new, what's current, what people should be doing now to really market themselves effectively on LinkedIn. So, always one of the topics that I love to talk about. So, welcome.
Super. Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad to
So,
be here.
yeah, great, great. So, Joe, let's get straight into it. So, you help leaders reach their goals and you help people figure out what's next. Okay, so that's very, very important. So, this whole concept of a North Star, right? I love this because I always say, is one of my favorite sayings is always be clear about your purpose or others will use you for theirs. So whenever
Absolutely.
yeah. Mhm. So when I heard that, um, it just resonated with me so much, and I thought, "You know what? That is gonna be my mantra for the rest of my life." But actually being clear about your purpose is something that a lot of people struggle with, isn't it?
It is. When you think about it, once you kind of get in the groove somewhere doing whatever you're doing, um, you're not thinking about, okay, how is it that I need to, what is it I need to be doing, to prepare myself for the next level? I spent a career in the military, and whether you like it or not, you're forced into a process of preparing yourself to, you know, both produce and project, for the future. So there are certain things you've got to be able to do in order to get promoted, have potential, and have greater responsibilities.
Yeah, so I suppose it always starts, doesn't it, with, having a clear sense of purpose and actually, knowing what you're aspiring towards, right?
Right. For example, sometimes I always start with, okay, where is it you are now? You know, and
Mhm.
believe it or not, most people don't have a problem with that. They can articulate that, you know, very, very well. Then I said, okay, where is it you want to go? What is it you want to achieve?
Mm.
And then sometimes people don't know that, and you kind of got to help them through that or give them the time to kind of work through that. But if you can define, okay, where is it you want to go, and you know where you're at, then I always say, then we can engineer a LinkedIn bridge to get you what you want. And
Yeah.
and most people, we talked about this a little, are conditioned by their grandparents to have a lot of humility, and so consequently, you just normally, culturally, undersell yourself.
Well, yes, and I think that there is it's that's an interesting concept because I think there are cultural differences, for example, between the US and the UK in that respect, in that we Brits, we're taught that really it is good to be very modest about yourself and not to brag. You know, a lot of people really don't like people who brag over here. So to us, the ways that some of the Americans will talk about themselves, to us seem very in your face. Because I mean, I do have some experience of this because my sister actually she lives in the US and I've been over there so much, and all of her children were brought up in the Palo Alto education system. And she always used to say, you know, it's all about getting them up in front of the class, doing presentations. It's all about self confidence and, you know, rah, 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 and kind of motivation and all of that kind of thing. And, you know, here are traditionally, I'm just saying traditionally, our education system was not like that at all. We weren't taught these skills of self-esteem and presentation and public speaking and selling ourselves. I think we think that's quite an American thing, I think, traditionally.
Yeah, so we I use a famous quote from one of our baseball players, of the 30s and 40s, and he was the Muhammad Ali of his time in baseball. So all the reporters, for radio, and used to follow him around and want to get quotes from him, right? And his thing was, they would say that he's boastful, braggadocious, and all this stuff, and he'd always say, "It ain't bragging if you done it."
True, true. Yeah. I mean,
Okay,
if you
and so
yeah.
that's where I start with people on LinkedIn. I said, "Look, we're not talking about you bragging, but if you can't measure your production, I can't sell you to a client." So I was in executive recruiting for a number of years,
Yeah.
and if you want to, make the final cut to where you're being interviewed, then
Mm.
you've got to have the metrics. Why are you better than the next guy? Or based on the position specification, job description, what are your metrics that say that you've been there, you've done that, and you have the Boy Scout merit badge saying that you did.
Well,
um,
absolutely.
and so because I run across a lot of that every day on LinkedIn. Everybody at our level, Jane,
Mhm.
is outstanding, has done well, to get to where you are. But okay, now if we're going to say, okay, we're both going to get promoted, right, to the next level. Well, that can't be done without a comparison of metrics, because everybody at this level or at a certain level is, the same if you've had that position. But what have you done? How would you measure it? How much money have you saved? How much money have you uh, made? How much percentage of profit or whatever? What effect did you and your team have on the bottom line?
Well, exactly, because people aren't mind readers, and if you don't tell them, they just assume you haven't done it right.
Absolutely, it's a subconscious thing. I mean, people will
Mhm.
tell you that we don't do that, but subconsciously, if they can find somebody that has laid it out there, and today it's pretty easy to check, you know, in
Yeah,
today's environment with a couple of calls, and
yeah,
and
yeah.
even and you don't even call anymore, you text.
Yeah, and I think the interesting I talk to my clients about this, quite a lot because a lot of my clients, some of my clients will have come out of a corporate career, and I
Right.
coach entrepreneurs, so I'm a brand marketer. That is my background and my history and so on. So I help my clients, really build their businesses fast. So rapid growth, I'm all about rapid growth, and so my clients that have come out of corporate and they've perhaps started up a new business, sometimes they're like, "Oh, I don't want to talk about what I did in my corporate career. That's not what I do now. It's really different." It's like, look, when people are buying you, they're buying the whole of your history and experience. They're not just buying what you've started doing in the last 9 months, year, 18 months, or 2 years. What they're really interested in is the whole person that comes from everything that you've done before. And unless you present yourself as an entire package, you might not want to think about those years when you were there frustrated and, desperate to be where you are now and doing what you're doing now. But it has meaning to other people, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like, okay, you're building a house, but there's no foundation. You say
Mm.
you want a new house, but you don't want to talk about the foundation you're building it on because um, people want to know that you've been through the drill. That you've been there, you've done it. You've got it. Especially if they're taking some sort of elemental risk, right? Because
Yeah,
if they're bringing you on, I mean, they're making a risk that they're not making a good decision. So I always say,
absolutely.
if you help the decision maker as best they can,
Mm.
give them the
Mhm.
information so that it's easy. In fact, one of my little stories is, look, I'm an executive recruiter. I'm the laziest person on the planet. The only thing lazier is the HR department. uh, and their contract recruiters, their contingency recruiters, and all that. And I said, so if you package yourself up so that everybody knows everything there is to know about you that's important. You put yourself in a beautiful box, use the best wrapping paper, use the best bow that you can. Everybody likes to hit the easy button.
Of course they do.
Okay. And so a lot of times I'll have a client to say, Joe, have you brought me the best person? And I say, I know I haven't. And they say, well, why haven't you brought me the best person? And I said, I found a really good person, but he won't follow my instructions. So why would I send him to you if he's not going to follow instructions by me? In other words, he needed to put things on his resume and we needed to clean up his LinkedIn profile so they kind of matched.
Yep.
And, he wasn't, into doing that. And I said, look, I'm against the timeline, I don't have time to grow you up. You know,
Mhm.
can you do this? Or, there's always other people. You're not the purple
Well,
unicorn.
absolutely. Yeah, that's it, and I think, our egos don't really like to think too much about that because we always like to think I think in a way, it's we always want to be cocooned in that little bubble of childhood where, we were loved and or at least that's the idea. Made to feel special and different. But as you said, the truth is when we're out there, we are constantly being compared to other people. And that shouldn't make
Absolutely.
us feel bad because some people
No,
are not our people. But it is business is a competitive world. Um, Particularly, obviously, if you're an entrepreneur or if you're, flying high in corporate, it's competitive. It
it
absolutely is.
is.
And we have to be at peace with being compared to others and for people sometimes choosing them over us because something about their history, their experience, or as you said, their results are going to resonate more, right?
Yeah, like let's take the example of, five people chosen to go into an interview. So now people are about to spend time, which is effort and, all of that on that. And so the reason you made it to the interview is that you were qualified.
Mm.
You're qualified, or else they wouldn't they wouldn't interview you. So then the interview is all about, can you make the emotional sale? In other words, is your emotional intelligence, is there going to be some spark in there that makes you better than the next guy or gal, that they're going to talk to in the interview process? And, I always say that's the ultimate sale. That's the one thing I can't help you with. You're in there, you're on your own, and you just got to interact and connect.
Well, yeah, that's it really. I mean, we all have to be as much of ourselves as we possibly can in every situation. And I think quite a few of the people that I speak to, they'll say, this is typically what they say. They say, "Look, I'm really, really good at being selling face to face." For example, they'll say that. So they say, "Put me in a meeting, and I'll outsell
Oh,
anybody. I'm great at selling." But, it's much harder for them to do this whole thing about actually projecting their personality, their character, their attributes, their value really online, and that is a challenge for most people, isn't it, Joe?
it is the younger crowd seems to be picking it up, earlier. We that came up through a completely different system, we're a little bit slower on the uptake. But for example, when I transitioned out of the military in 2004, trying to, transition into the private or public sector, I went to the newspaper because, there was executive jobs posted in the Houston Chronicle, and that kind of stuff, Dallas, the big, and, you can't find a newspaper that has hardly even a classified ads section anymore. So, I mean, but that was us, and that was kind of our generation. And what it's transformed to is you have to be able to merchandise and or the UK version sell yourself online. Because say if I was going to give a recommendation to a third party, hey, you need to talk to Jane. She's really cool at this and all this kind of stuff. What's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to go to Jane Baylor, and if they put it in Google, the first thing that's going to come up is your LinkedIn profile.
Well, that's right, yes.
And
Or your
so the
website.
reason, yeah, but for most of us, 99% of us, it's going to be your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, it will.
Whatever it is, because it might not be much, So that's where they're going to go. So people, this is a busy world, and people are going to go there, and it's your job to feed that person till they choke. In other words, they want enough of Jane. They want everything they want to know about Jane. They want it, one-stop shopping.
Yes,
They don't want to go
yeah.
to this, that, this, and then try to put that together. And whether we like it or not, the weapon of choice in business today is LinkedIn. And the reason for that is two people every second are joining LinkedIn. Don't you wish that you and I had two people looking at our websites every second?
Wow, yeah, yeah.
We'd be in the Bahamas.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, let's talk more about LinkedIn because, LinkedIn is my primary platform. I mean, I'm pretty active on Facebook, and obviously I've got the podcast, and I mean, I'm on all the
Mhm.
platforms, but LinkedIn is where I'll go every day because obviously my audience is B2B mostly. So you've been training people, helping people on LinkedIn for a really long time. So, what changes have you seen in that time, Joe? How is LinkedIn different today?
Oh my gosh, when I was on it, when I first got on it, and I have a plank, I'm a plank holder from the early days, but I could call up and talk to the chief marketing officer over the phone,
Wow.
and they made me slide decks.
Oh, really?
The marketing department and
Oh,
LinkedIn made me slide
gosh.
decks. And
Yeah.
that was
Oh,
after the dot-com boom, right? When
yeah,
all of
yeah.
that,
Mm,
because I couldn't
mm.
get anybody to join LinkedIn because they thought this LinkedIn thing was gonna steal their identity.
Okay.
But that was the mindset post dot-com boom, and so, yeah, I still have those, slide decks that just showed that it was kind of a networking organization,
And it was
now
safe and
yeah, and, all of that stuff, so now you can't there's no I don't think a phone number exists, for
Yeah.
LinkedIn,
Yeah,
but,
that's right.
so it started out kind of as a rudimentary resume tool that allowed you to interact with other people, and then it's just gone and added feature after feature after feature after feature. And in the future, since LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft, say they find Joe Frankie's networking company, and that it has some new AI networking thing that's you know really neat. And, they've got the ability to assess that, whatever. Well, if that's what they want, they've got the money to add that, as a tool. And that's what they did with lynda.com. They bought an educational tool and they added that to kind of the suite. And so initially, LinkedIn had the ability to sell your intellectual intelligence, and it's transformed to add the ability to sell your emotional intelligence. And by the depth of stuff that you can choose to populate on there if you want. I always tell a lot of people I deal with, I said, he said, well, I'm on LinkedIn. I said, yeah, I see you on LinkedIn. I said, you're on like the front page of the Wall Street Journal above the fold. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, all you have is a listing of your jobs, all that kind of stuff. And so LinkedIn has got the bottom of the fold. It's got pages 2 through 9. It's got an op-ed section. It's got a finance section, And I said, the challenge is, do you want to populate it? And what I've found is I've taken everything that, I know and do and found a way to populate it, throughout LinkedIn. And so the advantage to that is people find you and then they contact you and say, Joe, can you help me with this? Can you help me with
Mhm.
that? Some can't help you. No, I don't want to run a franchise. That kind of stuff. You get that kind of stuff too. But my point is, most of my business, I've never advertised internationally, and I've done business in 14 different countries. But
Mm.
all of that work came to me based on somebody finding me, or even better yet, a referral of somebody I'd work with and say, hey, you need to talk to Joe on this. So there's a lot
Mhm.
of power there. And what I encourage people to do is if you're not satisfied with what's happening, make the effort to populate it. Because what people don't understand is that your avatar is your LinkedIn profile. And your avatar is having coffee virtually with 37 people a day on average.
Mm.
And so the question is, how do you want to show up at coffee? Do you want to show up in your pajamas? You haven't combed your hair, or do you want to be dressed right, dressed and covered down, and be a professional?
Mhm. Yeah, it's so true everything that you say, and what I wanted to speak to you about. I mean, obviously, we all know that the algorithms are they AI driven? Would you say at the moment?
Yes, I mean because I had a guy call me
Yeah.
up one day and he said, "Look, Joe," he says, "you're an expert on LinkedIn." He says, "I want you to tell me." He says, "I'm hiring you as a consultant, but I want you to tell me how the algorithm works on LinkedIn."
Yeah.
And I said, "If I understood and could game the algorithm on LinkedIn," I said, "I'd be in the Bahamas.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
wouldn't be
yeah.
talking to me here."
Yeah, because it does always change, doesn't it? I've noticed, and I think other people have noticed that, sometimes your reach goes kind of up and sometimes it goes down and it's not always related to the quality of your content. Sometimes they are making these changes or they're adjusting things and it's To a certain extent, I mean, I used to work in broadcast TV, and, this is a debate that's been going on for donkey's years about, okay, somebody owns the platform, you don't own the platform, you don't make the choices, even, with Sky TV or whatever, you're in control to a certain extent. They give you control to a certain extent, true. But fundamentally, it's their platform. It has its own remit, and its own remit is really engagement, isn't it?
It is, and they're looking for all different forms of engagements. And as new methodologies of engagements come up, I'm sure they'll be in the forefront of that. And I think they use the algorithm to encourage various things. I mean, they're a big organization, and why shouldn't they experiment with things?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think to a certain extent, the way I think about LinkedIn is I think of it as being a bit like a shop window. It's a bit like,
Hmm.
obviously people can go to your website, which is more of a kind of static thing. But, LinkedIn's, it's a kind of updated, you can update it and people can get the most current version of you. And I think that's the thing that is really, really good about it. They can get to know you as if they have a relationship with you in real life. Because if they follow you and they get like a flavor of your content, then I mean, obviously you're never gonna resonate with anybody, but if you're good in terms of what you're putting out, then you will start to build that trust and that and you'll be entertaining people and they'll be like, "Oh, great, they'll look forward to seeing your feed," and sometimes they'll actively search you, whether it's put in front of them or not. So, I think that's when it works at its best, and I think, that there are still limitations though, aren't there? What would you say are the limitations of LinkedIn in your experience?
Uh, the limitations of LinkedIn is, for a while, you had all kinds of people trying to game the system, for getting the most contacts you can from a business standpoint. And, LinkedIn's pretty much, it shut that down, limiting to you for 100 connection requests, per week. And, I don't see that as, unreasonable. But, there was a whole cottage industry of people that were, had little AI bots and stuff that would send out thousands of LinkedIn connections. And I think they're trying to like regain a little bit of control, on that. I'm sure you get lots of connections requests, and I do as well. And one of the things I do is I always send a note back. Thank you for requesting, to connect. How do we know each other? What motivated you to reach out? So 83% of those don't get answered. So that just tells me that those are 83% were machines or some sort of massive, put out. And because if somebody responds back, well, I'm dealing with a person, right? And
Absolutely.
we have some sort of conversation and go from there.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, I've had some experience of those systems. Obviously, I'm a marketer. I'm very into automation. I'm always looking at automating, processes. I'm very interested in that kind of stuff. And there are there are some quite sophisticated ways of doing this stuff that are out there for sure. But I think, the thing about it, as far as I'm concerned, because I think many of the top marketers actually do advocate, using automation, and I think, the LinkedIn trainers, obviously, they're gonna support the stance of LinkedIn, which is say, "Hey, automation is a bad thing. This is all about relationships. It's all about human relationships." So, that there are 2 kind of schools of thought, but I think anybody that is using automation, it has to be done in a really, really subtle way that immediately, as soon as a response, comes, this is, my advice for anybody out there that's using automation, is to cut the automation immediately. A human responds and actually get into a human conversation, because you really cannot, expect to just push a button and for the process to be done for you of building relationships. You just can't do it beyond a certain,
No,
you can
I
start
agree.
a relationship, but it's very shallow. It's going to be very shallow, isn't it, really, if you're not willing to actually engage in person.
Yeah. So the way I figured it is, well, the other 83%. I mean, if I'm willing to spend a few minutes on the phone, I mean, I'm taking up my time, and if you're not willing to give me a few minutes of your time, then we really don't have anything to communicate about.
Definitely, definitely. And I think it's, as you said, it's obvious really when you're speaking to a real person because a conversation is very different, isn't it? I mean, I was actually having a look, interestingly enough. I got a message on Facebook today, and I was looking at, and I was like, this is definitely it's automation. Because let me see if I can find it. Mm. Yeah, so there would be questions that were asked, but they would be, kind of questions like, "Do you have a New Year's resolution?" And it's like, "Why are you asking me that? I don't even know you," you know? And so the questions would keep coming, and then I responded to a couple of them, and then it was like, "Do you know what? This is not a real person. This is just, not responding to my, conversation. Oh, why
Right.
did you ask me that?" Um, it's very, very easy to spot, I think, after a while. So, no, I was just trying to find it because, it was quite I can't find it, but it was quite an interesting kind of example of that you cannot people are not as stupid as you think they are.
No, they're not.
Yeah, and just asking them questions so that they engage with you, like stupid, meaningless questions when you don't even know them, like, "What is your New Year's resolution?" It's like, "You don't know me. Why, why would you want to know that kind of thing about me anyway?" It's quite a personal question, isn't it, really? But
Yeah, I
the
think so.
Yeah. But anyway, I guess we could talk about this all night. So let's get on to this thing about right. So you help people achieve their goals. So first of all, you help them get clear on where they are right now and where they want to be. And secondly, you help them actually get there. So you talked about this thing about building a bridge.
Mhm.
So tell us what does that bridge look like, Joe?
So the first thing is, okay, uh, where are you? Okay, most people do that. Then where is it you want to go? So usually for most people, it's okay, I am unemployed and I want to be employed.
Okay.
Or I am employed, but I'm not happy, or I want something else, or um, I want to, this sector is not going anywhere. I don't like the ups and downs, so I want to change sectors. So an example would be a petroleum engineer that wants to go into aeronautical engineering, space industry. Another one is, and I get this frequently from women, is how do I get promoted where I work? In other words, how do I get them to see me so that I can get promoted here?
Oh, yeah.
And
Mhm.
the other one is entrepreneurs. Okay, how do I subtly start building, relationships with people? I have my day job and I'm keeping the day job, but I need to branch out into this other space because that's where my interest and future lies.
Yeah,
So you can imagine all the variants to all of those because they're just about as individual as the people.
yeah.
And I have had companies call me and said, Joe, we want you to come in and train our executive team. We got 12 of them here, and we want you to train them on LinkedIn. And I said, wait a second. I will come in and give you a presentation on LinkedIn, but if you want them uh, uh, to be successful, I need to coach them one-on-one. And they go,
Mhm.
well, they're all at the same level. And I said, no. I said, there's LinkedIn 101, 201, 301, 401, 501, and 601. There's PhD level LinkedIn. And what most people need is just the cusp of 301 to get what they want. And so when we talk to a group, why would I want to be talking at like an elementary level? And all these other people, they're already at 301. What they want is 401 or 501. And
Makes sense.
so I've turned down some opportunities to do that because um, I've never coached the same way twice. And people say, well,
Yeah.
why do you say that? And I said, well, no individual I've coached is the same as the next person.
Mm.
All of them
Yeah,
have
I mean,
different
good
hopes and
point.
dreams.
Mhm. Well,
And it's
different
not
different
about what I
hopes
want.
and yeah. Yeah, yeah.
It's what they want.
Yeah, but, it's also different hopes and dreams, different skill sets,
Yep.
different, different educational backgrounds, different experiences, and actually being at the same level comment is a very broad brushstroke, isn't it? As you said.
Yeah, that's the difference between, helping somebody develop and giving a presentation. The presentation are just the general aspects of LinkedIn, the importance, why, and it's a monster, and whether you like the monster or not, the monster is going to be here, through your lifetime, you know. So you can either fight City Hall or, you can roll with the flow and, go in with the tide and come out with the tide.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, Joe, let's get into the PhD level because I would probably consider myself to be in the higher echelons, let's just say, of LinkedIn. So, what are the features that you would say belong to, or the practices or whatever that you would say are up there in the PhD level
So
usage?
at the PhD level, it's all about who you are and selling every bit of you.
Hmm.
Okay. And so I've made the most money off LinkedIn based on my high school education entry.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. And a lot of people don't even have their high school on their LinkedIn profile.
No, they don't. No, I don't even know. I don't even think I do, really.
Well, so what happens is anybody that's on LinkedIn has probably gone to high school
Yeah.
because they can read and write and articulate the English language enough to be there.
Yeah.
Um, so what happens is people tend to gravitate. Okay, what's the lowest common denominator on LinkedIn? The lowest common denominator would be where you went to high school, what you did in high school.
Mhm.
And what I find is people will start. I have a CEO call me up and say, "Well, Joe, I learned to fly when I was in high school." And the only place he could have found that was in an entry on my LinkedIn profile.
Oh.
Joe, I did competitive poetry interpretation when I was in high school. You know,
Oh.
so my point is, you have a conversation, and that
Mm.
conversation will either go nowhere or you'll begin a relationship. And what brought this home to me years ago was somebody called me up and said, "Hey, Joe, you went to American Legion Boys State." And I said, "Yes, I did." And he said, "I did too." And he said, "I've been all through your profile, up and down, and you've handled some of the most unstructured projects that I have found.
Mhm.
And I need help with this unstructured project." And I said, "Well, you know, I don't know, I mean, if you have a complex project, you need a team." He said, "Well, yeah, but I want you to find a team." I said, "Okay, let's hear more about it." And so what he told me is he tried to solve this thing with two top tier management consulting firms, spent fortunes on it. And he says, "Now I've come to you." And I said, "Why in the world do you think I'm going to?" He said, "I tried to solve this problem intellectually.
Mhm.
And now I'm going to solve this problem emotionally. I'm going to find somebody I trust first, and then I'm going to ask them to see if they know how to do it."
Yeah, and that's really what it's all about because because that's really interesting, very, very kind of interesting. And that point that you make about trust, I think that's the really big thing because there is obviously, as a marketer, I'm very, very interested in human psychology because if I don't understand it, if I don't understand the psychology of motivation, I wouldn't be able to market effectively to people because you have to understand how people's brains work, and that in the first instance, they are going to be very skeptical because that's just how our brains work. It's how it goes back anthropologically, centuries, that we are hardwired to have distrust in the beginning, right? So that obviously translates online, doesn't it? And so that whole thing of getting over that hurdle of trust is massive, isn't it? Really massive.
It is, and that's why I always say, um, you know, when that when that information dragon comes, to eat, why don't you shovel it hay and let it, instead of letting it tear up all your shrubs and
Mm,
lawn and everything else? Because when somebody comes and looking for something, just like this individual did, he came looking for something. And
yeah,
so he didn't stop until he was absolutely choked on information. In
yeah.
other words, he'd been through, I've got like maybe 60 projects listed there.
Mm,
And he named three very specific projects
mhm.
that he thought were good training ground that I had experienced that would help solve, you know, uh, his challenge. And so what I learned from that was, okay, we don't understand it. And I mean, our minds, we think how we think, but you have the whole universe out here. And my whole point is, you put everything that you know and you've done, and you articulate it on LinkedIn profile, and then you let people come to you. I mean,
Yeah.
I, like you, are in business. We still try to find people. But if people are coming to you asking, hey, can you help me on this? Yes, I can. No, I can't. Here's our terms. Let's work together. I mean, that beats all the amount of effort that we went going through and trying to find that person on our own through various marketing methodologies.
Most definitely. And, another thing that I've realized, I suppose over the last, few months is that some of the best opportunities that have come to me in terms of consulting, because 'cause I'm also a consultant, um, I look at my posts, I look at my articles, and these people who brought me opportunities, they don't sometimes they'll like, but most of the time they won't. Most of the
Hmm.
time, they're invisible because and as I often say this to my clients, the buyers, they don't need to be on LinkedIn. They don't need to be getting busy and building their profiles or whatever. It's the sellers that do. So they
Yeah.
don't bother. They just go on there and they treat it like a form of entertainment. They're there looking at everything, but they don't need to stand out. And that's a thing that I realized because people have they've come to me and I said, "Oh, I've seen you're on LinkedIn. It's really fantastic. You do some good content or whatever." Because obviously, what I've done resonates with them because I'm in their target market or whatever. So, and then I'm like, I don't even know you. I really don't know you. And I think that's when it really brought home to me that there is a point in this consistent effort, even if you think the right people aren't commenting or they aren't liking, you're not getting noticed or whatever, it doesn't mean that nobody is not that people are not noticing you, right?
Right. You're making that profile for the one in 100.
Yeah.
You're not making it for the masses. It's just like
Yeah.
that one found what he wanted, and he drilled down deep,
Mhm.
and that, he was fed, right?
Mhm.
And it was like one-stop shopping, because if he leaves my profile or your profile, the chances of them coming back,
Mhm.
that's a very low percentage.
Yeah, yeah. I really like that. I love that way of looking at things that, It's the 1 in 100. It's a bit like, look, I mean, we've always got to draw parallels with real life, haven't we? And say, if you were at a networking meeting, you had a big meeting or big event or whatever, live event, you might be introduced to lots of people, but
Right.
you'll probably only have one really interesting conversation where you're just like, you click with somebody.
Right, and you contact them, they contact you back, and it kind of starts. But you're right, you'll end up with 25 under the old system. You'd end up with 25 business cards, but really at the end, maybe one or two is the ones that really work out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Joe, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you tonight. Now, your book, tell us what it's called again.
It's called LinkedIn, the 5 minute drill for executive networking success.
Mhm.
And so a lot of executives that came to me and says, I don't need to be on this LinkedIn stuff. And but the company says I need to. And I said, well, yeah, you're holding the flag. I
Yeah,
said, you
yeah.
got to be there. And he said, well, I don't want to spend any time there. I said, okay. So I came up with this drill of how they could leave their paw print
Mhm.
on LinkedIn. And in the 5 minute drill, it teaches them how to very disciplined. There's a checklist, and they go do it. And because I got complaints from a couple of CEOs and said, this takes me more than 15 minutes. And I said, well, you're not following the checklist. It doesn't say you. I said, you follow that checklist. I'm not saying when you find something interesting, you don't divert, you just follow it. And after about 2 weeks, he said, Joe, I called to apologize. If I follow the checklist, it takes 5 minutes. And I said,
Well, there
yeah,
you go.
there's nothing wrong with using more, but everybody complained to me, hey, I want to be on there 5 minutes and I want to be out. So that's there. And then the rest of the book is kind of how to use LinkedIn. So the first 5 or 10 pages is for the kind of executives on how to accomplish their goal and not spend any time on it. And
Yeah.
the rest of it is okay, how to use LinkedIn to get what you want. And it's co-authored by Lori Ruff. She's a subject matter expert on LinkedIn, and she really does a good job with what I call the woman side of it. And
Mhm.
I'm kind of the military engineer side.
Yeah, yeah, I like that, very much. So you get a drill. I love that, and a checklist. And what's more, you precisely timed it to, take somebody no more than an hour, right? To read.
Yes, it's the hardest thing I've ever done.
Mm.
There's 173 pages on the cutting room floor, but the goal was you get on an airplane. It's a 1 hour flight, and you will be done.
There you go. Well, that is the optimum in efficiency, isn't it? So anybody that wants to minimize their time and maximize their results on LinkedIn, definitely get Joe's book.
It's being used in high school business classes as well
Amazing. Oh, that's fantastic.
because it's
So
short.
yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's the magic formula really, isn't it now? We all like short content because attention is at such a premium, right? So Joe, if anybody wants to contact you, I'm assuming that LinkedIn is probably the best way to go about
Yeah,
it.
Joe Frankie the third on LinkedIn.
Okay.
The URL is what you see, just all run together. Joe Frankie triple I.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Joe, for joining us this evening on the Smart Connected group. It's a very rainy day here in here in London, but I'm sure that the weather's probably a bit better where you are. So,
Yeah, it's 65 and sunny.
ah,
It's a tough
nice.
winter here in Houston.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So, yeah, thank you again, Joe. It's been
Thank
wonderful,
you,
and
Jane. Thank
yeah.
you. I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, look forward to keeping in touch. Bye for now.